Welcome to Feed Your Mind Wellness. I'm Dr. Sandi Scheinbaum. I'm very excited because today we are at the Skokie Public Library and I have a wonderful audience who will be helping me cook. What are we going to cook? Greens. The topic of our show is greens, glorious greens. When we talk about getting healthy, we talk about putting in the good stuff and taking out the bad stuff. So the show today is not about the bad stuff, it's about the good stuff. It's about greens. And when you cook greens, there's often a lot of confusion. What do I do with it? How do I prepare it? How do I buy it? What does it look like? And that's what we're going to focus on today. It's going to be all about preparing all the different things you can do with greens as well. So let's talk about greens. The first thing we're going to do with you guys is a little show and tell and a little quiz. I'm going to be holding up some greens. There's a whole range of greens. First of all, what are greens? They're leaves and stalks. So that's the first thing you want to know about greens. They're, besides being green color, they're leaves and stalks. So when you think about, okay, what am I going to have to eat today? What am I going to serve for dinner? What am I going to make? The one thing you want to talk about first of all, want to think about, is what green am I going to cook today? Not is it going to be meat, chicken, fish, beans as my entree. You think of greens. Greens fill your plate, and then the rest of the food surrounds it and fills in. So what are these greens? So you'll notice everything that we're going to show and talk about has leaves and stalks. So the first thing, we can start with these. So just shout out, what are these?
Parsley.
Parsley. Okay, so there's two kinds. This is curly, there's Italian. Some people say Italian is better because the more nutrients, but I love the taste of curly parsley and I use it in everything. Why is parsley good for you? Parsley is a cleanser. It has lots of chlorophyll. That's what leaves are. They're filled with chlorophyll. That's the good stuff. And it doesn't matter if it's a little leaf like this or if it's bigger ones that we're going to talk about. They all have chlorophyll. They're all cleansing. I juice with it. I cook with it a lot. I put it in smoothies. The next one is also this little one. Now this has a bigger stalk and leaves, so it's bok choy. Specifically baby bok choy. These are wonderful. How many people have cooked with baby bok choy? Raise your hands. Yeah, it's great, and it doesn't take a long time to cook, and it's wonderful. It's basically like a celery almost. It's mostly stalk. You can get the big one or the baby ones. If you can find them, they're easy to find in supermarkets, and they cook very, very quickly. I love to add them to stir fry. So every time you're making a stir fry, I think, it's not green enough. What can I add to have more green? So think bok choy. Bok choy is very, very high in calcium. It's one of the highest in calcium. So one of the things that's great about greens, besides being cleansing, is they're strengthening. Why are they strengthening? They have lots of minerals. So anyone can name some minerals that might be in some of these greens?
Iron.
So they have iron, yes. Magnesium, perfect. And our soil is very depleted of magnesium, and it's impossible to get enough magnesium. So calcium, we think of calcium from dairy, but really a great source of calcium are these greens. You can get a lot of calcium, and they're easily absorbed. That's the great thing about greens. We can absorb our minerals from these greens. All right, so here's one that you may not be familiar with. Does anyone recognize these? You could go outside and just think of, yeah, they're dandelions. So we think of these as just weeds, obnoxious weeds. We don't want them in our garden, but you can cook with them, and they're very inexpensive, and they have a more bitter taste. However, bitter is good. Bitter is your friend. If you taste something and you recognize it has a bitter taste, that's a good thing for a couple of reasons. First, because the more the taste is bitter, the more health properties that green has. So if you had iceberg lettuce, would that be bitter?
No.
So it's not so good for you. But if you like say, ooh, I can't eat this, that means it's good. And I believe in food as medicine. So food as information. It's not just a calorie. It's not just something to be digested. It's actually information, and it tells your genes something. These are dandelion greens, and I love anything that we're talking about, all the ways we can prepare greens, you can use any of these. Doesn't matter.
Are they readily available in the stores?
Great question. Are they readily available in the stores? Yes. Years ago they were not, but most of the major supermarkets have them. And if you shop at a store and they don't have them, you tell the produce manager, I want dandelion greens. And there's a lot of local suppliers that will get dandelion greens available. So, yes?
What about the wild ones that grow in our gardens?
Like growing them yourself. Well, if you have planted them yourself and you get them from a reputable seed company, or but I would not just go out and pick dandelion greens, because I don't know what I'm doing. And so I would be afraid to, yes.
On the side of McCormick.
Yeah.
Right, picking.
Yeah. There's a big problem with that. The number one problem would be, what did they spray that soil, those dandelions with? They might be loaded with pesticides. So I would want to get them from a reputable supplier, just to be safe. Okay, so now we're going to go on to these greens. So anyone want to take a guess at what these are? Good guess, but it's not kale.
Mustard.
Mustard, yes, mustard greens. Okay, now we're talking about really pungent, okay? Mustard greens are very aromatic. So this would be, if you are new to greens, mustard greens would not be the ones you would start with. You would start with something milder, like a kale, like parsley, like romaine lettuce. You would not go to mustard greens, but mustard greens are great. Again, they're cleansing, they're loaded with minerals, they're wonderful, and you can do all kinds of sauces. They're great with curry and nutmeg. It's a great way to prepare them. Okay, so finally we come to actually there's two more. So they come in all sizes. These are smaller, these are big giant ones. What are these? Anyone? Collard greens, yes. So the collard greens, one of the ways I love to do collard greens is as a wrap. So you take one of these, take a big leaf, and I just pour boiling water over it and just blanch them. Or you can dip it in boiling water, take it out in like a second, and then you have a new sandwich. So you're going to take off the stem, and now it's softened. And I just put any filling in that you would normally use as a sandwich. You roll it up, and now you have a wrap. Collard greens are wonderful that way. They're also great sautéed. And finally, we get to kale. So this is two kinds of kale. Does anyone know the name of this one? Yes, lacinato. It's also been called dinosaur kale. It's a little darker. This is a great kale. If you juice, you can put this in juice. It's very sturdy. And this one is the curly kale. And later in the program, we're going to show how to do kale chips, which is one of my favorite ways to use kale. But kale can be the go-to green. You can eat kale every single day. It's great for you. Tons and tons of calcium, magnesium, other important minerals. So think kale. Anytime you want to use spinach, think, no, I can do kale. And restaurants are starting to do kale. They're starting to serve it as a side dish. You'll notice that spinach and chard is not here. And the reason for that is that most of you know about spinach and chard. Those, as well as beet greens, are very high in something called oxalic acid, oxalates, and if you have any thyroid issues, for example, they can depress thyroid function. So it's not like you should never eat spinach, but you want to rotate your greens. So here's a great array of greens. Rotate them. When I'm making a green smoothie, which we're going to talk about next, one day I'll use parsley, the next day you may use kale, I may switch to collard, so you're giving your body a variety of greens. The easiest way to do a smoothie is to start with water. So I've just already filled this with a cup of water. And then I'm going to take some greens. Now the nice thing is, for convenience purposes, most stores will have pre-washed greens. And you really don't need to wash again because there's more contaminants in the water that you've used to rewash them than what they are right now in the box. So you just take a handful of greens. Now I've done this to show you, I have a big blender at home. But I wanted to show you how easy this is to do in they sell personal blenders. And you can travel with it, or if you don't want to invest in a high-powered blender, this could be another option. So you put in some greens. You always want to put your liquid in first, no matter what kind of blender you have. You always start with your base of liquid. And I like to use water. You can use unsweetened almond milk, which would be another great choice. And then we're going to use some fruit. You can use fresh fruit, but since we don't have ice, and it's easy to always have frozen fruit. And so it's flash frozen, and you can use so there's a whole array of fruits that you can use. You can use berries. You can use mixed berries. If you want it to be creamy, you can use a banana. However, if you have blood sugar problems, that might not be such a good choice to do. Then you could use an avocado. You can put in half an avocado. Sometimes I've even put in a whole avocado. It makes it creamy. You don't taste the avocado. It just gives it that milkshakey consistency, which is great. So, okay, I've got my water, got greens. I put in a banana for creaminess. And then a good choice would be to add something like mango. Goes well. The greens that I used here are a mixture. There's a mixture of kale, colored or kale charred, and a little bit of spinach. If you're making a smoothie for kids, you would probably want to use the milder green first. So you'd use the romaine lettuce, you'd use spinach, and use a lot more fruit. And then gradually you'd reduce the fruit. If you have, again, any concerns with blood sugar, you would not be doing the mango and banana. You would be doing some fruit, some berries with that. So then we're just going to put in some mango. If you're doing this for breakfast, for example, you would also add a protein powder. And there are lots of different protein powders that you can get that are just the main thing, the important thing with protein powder is know your source, know where it comes from. So, and then you just let it go. Okay, now I stopped it on purpose because if you don't have a high-powered blender, what could happen is there's little pieces still. It didn't do a great job of making it totally smooth and creamy. Well, there's an easy way to solve that. How many of you have just a fine strainer? Just a strainer. So, okay, now when you take it out, instead of pouring it into your glass and drinking it, you pour it through the strainer, and that takes all the pieces out. Like when my daughters were little and they hated the orange juice with pulp and I had to strain it. Okay, it's the same idea. So if you taste it and you say, oh, there's little pieces of kale, I don't like this, just take a fine strainer and just pour it through the strainer.